The night my sister came to me in a dream, I was sleeping alone for the first time in 34 years. My husband had gone to bed early, said he was tired, which had become his answer for everything lately. I'd stayed up watching the news, a glass of chamomile tea going cold on the coffee table, thinking about how strange it felt to sit in my own living room and feel like a guest. I finally went upstairs around 11, and I must have fallen asleep fast because I don't even remember closing my eyes. But then Charlotte was there. She looked the way she did in her early 40s. Before the cancer, before the treatments hollowed her out. Her hair was dark and full, the way it used to be when we were both still young enough to think we had all the time in the world. She was standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite make out, and she was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face while she was alive. Not quite fear. Something closer to urgency. She said, "Irene, don't eat the pie." That was it. Nothing else. I tried to ask her what she meant. In the dream, I could feel my mouth moving, but she was already gone, and I woke up to the gray light of a February morning and my husband's side of the bed already empty. I lay there for a few minutes, heart beating a little too fast. Charlotte had been gone for 6 years by then. 6 years, and I still reached for the phone sometimes to call her. Grief is funny that way. It doesn't follow any kind of schedule. I told myself the dream was just my mind doing what minds do, pulling up old faces, old voices, replaying things. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window, and watched the birds at the feeder I'd put up last spring. My husband came in, kissed me on the cheek, said good morning the way he always did. Everything was ordinary. Everything was fine. But the dream stayed with me the way some dreams do, sitting just behind your eyes all day, waiting. I should tell you about my life so you understand what I mean when I say I wasn't looking for anything to be wrong. I'm 63 years old. I live in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, in a house my husband and I bought when our daughter was in elementary school. His name is Raymond, and we met at a company picnic in 1989 when I was 27 and he had just been promoted to regional sales manager and thought very highly of himself. I thought very highly of him too for a while. We've been married since 1991. Our daughter Stephanie is 32 now, living in Portland with her husband and our 2 grandchildren, a boy named Oliver, who's 7, and a girl named June, who just turned 4. My sister Charlotte was 2 years older than me. She died of ovarian cancer at 59. It was fast. Too fast. She was diagnosed in October and gone by the following June, and I don't think I've ever fully finished grieving her, if I'm honest. She was the person who knew me best in the world. She knew things about me that Raymond never knew, things I'd never thought to tell him, because Charlotte and I had the kind of relationship where you don't have to explain yourself. You just are who you are, and the other person already understands. After she died, I threw myself into things. I volunteered at the library. I helped plan my church's annual fundraiser. I kept busy the way you do when you're trying to outrun something. Raymond and I kept going. Dinners, holidays, the grandchildren's birthdays. A life that looked, from the outside, like what it was supposed to be. The February that Charlotte came to me in that dream, I was 3 weeks away from my 63rd birthday. Raymond had been mentioning for months that he wanted to do something special. He kept saying we should have people over. His brother and sister-in-law. A few couples we'd been friends with for years, the neighbors. He said he wanted to cook, which was unusual enough that I noticed it. Raymond had never been the type to spend time in the kitchen. He could make eggs and he could work a grill, and that was about the extent of it. But suddenly he was watching cooking videos on his phone, ordering things from a specialty grocery website, talking about wanting to make a proper dinner with a homemade pie for dessert. I thought it was sweet. I thought he was trying. I should have asked more questions. A few days after the dream, I was looking for a sweater I'd left in the upstairs hall closet. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I genuinely had no reason to snoop. I opened the closet, moved a few things around, and found a box on the top shelf that I didn't recognize. It was small, maybe the size of a shoebox, pushed back toward the wall behind a stack of old towels. I'm 5'4" and normally I wouldn't even be able to see back there, but I'd stepped up on the little wooden step stool we keep in the hall, and there it was. I told myself it was a birthday gift. I almost put it back without opening it. Instead, I stood there on that step stool for a long moment, and then I opened the box. Inside was a small glass vial, a folded piece of paper, and a receipt from a supplement company I'd never heard of. The vial had a handwritten label on it that said nothing legible, just a letter and a number, like a code. The paper was a printed order confirmation. The receipt showed a purchase made 6 weeks earlier, shipped to our home address. My first thought was completely rational. Raymond was a diabetic. He took insulin. Maybe this was some kind of new medication, some kind of supplement his doctor had recommended. Maybe I was holding something perfectly ordinary, but I knew what his medication looked like. I'd picked up his prescriptions 100 times over the years. This wasn't it. I put the box back exactly the way I'd found it. I went downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to think. Here is what I remembered. Sitting there, Charlotte telling me once, years before she got sick, about a woman she'd read about in the news. A woman whose husband had been slowly poisoning her with something undetectable, something he'd ordered online, something that mimicked a natural illness. Charlotte had said, "Can you imagine not even knowing?" And I had said no. I had said I couldn't imagine. I thought about the pie Raymond was planning to make me for my birthday. I thought about Charlotte standing at the edge of that gray place in my dream, saying my name. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself I'd been watching too much true crime. I made lunch. I did the laundry. I went to my library volunteer shift and helped 3 different people find books they were looking for, and I was completely normal all day, and then I came home and I couldn't sleep. The next morning, Raymond left early for what he said was a work meeting. He's semi-retired now. He does some consulting, keeps his own hours, comes and goes without much explanation. I never thought anything of it. I found myself watching his car pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window, and I thought, when did I stop asking where he was going? I went to his home office. I'm not proud of it, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel like I was crossing some line. But I went in, and I sat at his desk, and I opened his laptop. I knew his password. It was the same one he'd used for 15 years. Our daughter's name and birth year. He'd always said it was the easiest thing to remember. The first thing I found was an email thread with someone whose name I didn't recognize. A woman. The emails went back 8 months. I read enough to understand what they were, and then I stopped reading because I'd understood. I sat there in his office for a long time. Then I kept looking because I needed to know how bad it was. The emails were bad enough. But what I found in his browser history was something else. Searches for medication interactions. Searches for substances that could cause cardiac events in someone with, and here he'd specified, a history of high blood pressure and a low normal heart rate. Searches for how long certain compounds remain detectable in the bloodstream. I am 63 years old and I have been married to this man for 34 years. And I sat in his office and read those searches and felt the floor go out from under me. I want to tell you what that feels like, because I don't think there are words for it exactly. It's not like finding out someone is cheating on you, though that was already there, already shattering something inside me. It's something colder than that. It's the moment when the person you have shared your life with becomes a stranger, and you realize the stranger has been there the whole time, underneath, and you were just the last one to see it. I closed the laptop. I put everything back. I went to the kitchen and I stood at the sink and I ran the cold water over my wrists the way my mother used to tell me to do when I was upset, and I thought, what do I do now? The first person I wanted to call was Charlotte. I can't explain what it's like to reach for someone who isn't there anymore. You'd think after 6 years I'd have stopped doing it. But grief doesn't work on a schedule, like I said. And in that moment, I needed my sister more than I had needed anything in a very long time. I didn't call Raymond's brother. I didn't call any of our couple friends because they were his friends as much as mine, and I didn't know who I could trust. I called my daughter. Stephanie answered on the second ring. She was in the middle of something. I could hear Oliver in the background asking about his soccer cleats. But when she heard my voice, she said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And something about the fact that she could tell, just from my voice, made me start crying in a way I hadn't let myself cry since Charlotte died. I told her everything. I told her about the vial and the receipt. I told her about the browser searches. I told her about the emails. She was very quiet while I talked, and when I was done, she said, "Mom, I need you to get out of the house." She wanted me to drive to Portland. I told her I wasn't going to drive to Portland, that it was a 2-day drive and I wasn't going to leave my house like a person fleeing from something. I told her I needed to be smart about this. What I did instead was this. I called an attorney. I'd used a lawyer once, years ago, for a property issue related to my mother's estate, and I still had his card in my address book. A firm in Dublin, Ohio, just north of Columbus. I called, explained enough that the receptionist put me through to someone that same afternoon, and I sat in a conference room across from a woman named, well, I'll call her my attorney, because this isn't her story, and I told her what I'd found. She listened. She didn't look surprised in the way that made me feel like I was overreacting. She looked like someone who had heard things like this before, which was both reassuring and terrible. She told me not to touch the vial. She told me to document everything I could from the laptop before Raymond noticed anything had been moved. She told me to be very careful about what I ate and drank in that house. I drove home and I cooked dinner and I sat across from Raymond at the kitchen table and I watched him eat and I ate the things I had made myself. And I talked about the library and the birds and Oliver's soccer, and I was a completely different person than the woman who had sat at his desk that morning. I don't know how I did it. I think Charlotte helped me. I think she was with me somehow right there at that table, keeping me steady. Over the next 10 days, I did things I never imagined I would do. I took photographs of the inside of that box on the closet shelf with my phone from every angle without moving anything. I went back to Raymond's laptop twice more while he was out, and I photographed every email in that thread, every search, every tab he'd had open. I found financial documents that I hadn't known existed. A life insurance policy taken out on me 18 months earlier, with a payout my attorney later told me was significant. I was the insured. Raymond was the sole beneficiary. We had an existing life insurance policy, one we'd taken out together years ago that named each other and Stephanie. I'd known about that one. I had signed the paperwork for that one. This new one, I had not signed anything. My attorney explained to me later what that meant. I also found, buried in a folder of what looked like old tax documents, a lease agreement, an apartment in Westerville, a small city just outside Columbus. Raymond's name on it. And a name I didn't recognize. A woman's name. The lease had started 11 months ago, so there it was. The whole shape of it. The affair, the apartment, the insurance policy, the vial in the closet. I took everything to my attorney. She contacted the appropriate people. I am not going to go into the details of what happened next from a legal standpoint because some of it is still being resolved, and my attorney has advised me to be careful about what I say publicly. What I will tell you is that the substance in the vial was tested. I will tell you that it was not insulin and it was not a supplement. I will tell you that the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office became involved and that Raymond was arrested 3 weeks after I found that box on the closet shelf, 4 days before my 63rd birthday. He was not home to make me the pie he had been planning. Stephanie flew in from Portland with the kids. We ordered takeout from my favorite Italian place, the one on High Street that's been there since the 90s, where Charlotte and I used to go after our mother's chemotherapy appointments, sitting in the corner booth sharing a piece of tiramisu because neither of us could afford our own. Oliver ate an entire bowl of pasta and then fell asleep on my couch with his shoes still on. June climbed into my lap and patted my face with her small hand and said, "Grandma sad?" And I told her no. Grandma was okay. Grandma was going to be fine. I meant it when I said it. There are things I've had to sit with, things I don't think I'll ever fully make sense of. I spent 34 years with a man I thought I knew, and I was wrong about him in a way that goes so deep I can't quite find the bottom of it. I keep thinking about all the ordinary mornings, the coffee, the birds at the feeder, the way he kissed me on the cheek and said good morning, and wondering which ones were real and which ones were something else. I don't know if that question has an answer. I filed for divorce. The paperwork is moving through the courts. My attorney says the financial picture will take time to untangle, but that I am protected, that the things Raymond tried to do to me actually work against him in ways he apparently didn't think through carefully enough. Stephanie calls every day. Oliver FaceTimes me to show me his soccer games and tell me about a book he's reading about dinosaurs. June draws pictures and Stephanie mails them to me. Crayon drawings of our house and the bird feeder and a tall woman she labels Grandma in her 4-year-old handwriting. I have them on my refrigerator. I look at them every morning when I get my coffee. I started sleeping better. Not perfectly, but better. Some nights I still reach for Charlotte in that half-awake place before you're fully conscious. That soft space where the rules about who's still here don't quite apply yet. Some nights I think I feel her there. I know what the rational explanation is for the dream. I know that my mind was processing things it had noticed without me. Small wrongnesses, things just slightly off, the details that didn't add up that I'd filed away without examining. I know grief changes the brain, that the people we love most leave traces in us that can surface in strange ways. I know all of that, but I also know this. I found that box 3 days after Charlotte came to me in that dream, and if I hadn't found the box, I would have eaten that pie. And I don't know what the birthday after my 63rd would have looked like, or whether there would have been one. She always was the smarter one of the two of us. She was always the one who saw things coming before I did, who watched out for me without making me feel watched. Even from wherever she is now, even 6 years gone, she managed to show up when I needed her most. I talk to her sometimes when the house is quiet. I tell her about the kids, about Stephanie, about the birds at the feeder who are starting to come back now that it's warming up. I tell her about what's happening with the lawyers and the courts, and I hear her voice in my head the way I always did. Practical and dry and a little bit funny even about serious things. I told her, just the other night, you saved my life. I could almost hear her laughing at me. She would have said something like, you would have figured it out eventually. She would have said, don't be dramatic. She would have said something that made me roll my eyes and love her more. If you're reading this and you have a sister or a brother, a mother, a friend, anyone who knows you the way Charlotte knew me, call them. Call them today. Tell them something real. Don't wait for the right moment, because the right moment is now, while they're still here to answer. And if someone you love comes to you in a dream, pay attention. I'm telling you, pay attention. People ask me sometimes, now that the story has come out, now that the people who needed to know do know, how I stayed so calm through all of it. How I sat across from Raymond at the dinner table night after night during those 10 days and talked about the birds and the grandchildren and acted like a woman with nothing on her mind. I don't have a clean answer for that. I think when your survival instinct finally wakes up, it wakes up all the way and it's surprisingly quiet, not panicked, just clear. What I've come to understand, sitting with all of this over the months since, is that nothing that happened was accidental. Not Raymond's choices, Not mine, not the consequences that followed for both of us. He spent years building a version of our life that looked one way on the surface and was something else entirely underneath. He made choices, small ones first, probably, the way all of it starts. And each one made the next one easier, until he was a man, hiding a vial in a closet and searching online for how to make a death look natural. That doesn't happen overnight. That's the result of a long series of decisions, each one a little further from the person you could have been. And I made choices too. I chose, for a long time, not to look too closely at things that didn't quite add up. I chose the comfort of the ordinary over the discomfort of the knowing. I don't say that to blame myself for what he did. I want to be clear about that. What Raymond planned is on Raymond, fully and completely. But I think about the version of me who might have seen it sooner, who might have trusted her own instincts earlier, who might have been less afraid of what she'd find if she started asking questions. That woman would have suffered less. I want to be more like her going forward. Charlotte was the bravest person I knew. She wasn't fearless. She was afraid of plenty of things, but she never let fear make her stupid. She looked at hard things directly. She asked the uncomfortable question. She told you what she saw, even when you didn't want to hear it. I spent years watching her do that and thinking it was just her personality, just the way she was wired. I understand now that it was a choice she made, over and over, to see clearly even when it was easier not to. That's what I'm trying to learn. Not fearlessness, just the willingness to look. Stephanie calls it my second chapter, and she means it kindly, but I'm not sure I think of it that way. It's not a new story, it's the same story, just finally being told honestly. The house is quieter now, and some days the quiet is hard, and some days it feels like the first real breath I've taken in years. Oliver sends me videos of his soccer goals. June drew me a picture of a rainbow last week with my name written underneath it in her careful 4-year-old letters. I put it on the refrigerator next to the others. I look at it every morning. That's enough. That's more than enough. And I almost didn't get to have it. Pay attention to the people who love you enough to tell you the truth. Pay attention to the thing inside you that notices when something is wrong, even when you don't want it to be. And if someone who knew you, really knew you, down to the bone, comes to you in the quiet of a dream and says your name, don't roll over and go back to sleep. Listen,